I saw my dead husband laughing at a corner table in Trattoria Marcello yesterday afternoon, and I swear to God, I thought I was losing my mind. Not a man who looked like Thomas, not someone with a similar build or the same silver hair. It was him. His shoulders moved the exact same way when he found something genuinely funny. That little head tilt to the left when he was fully relaxed. And that laugh. That specific laugh with the slight rasp at the end that always made me smile for 34 years of marriage. 11 months ago, I held Thomas in my arms on our kitchen floor while he died. Cerebral aneurysm, instant. The paramedics said there was nothing anyone could have done. I watched them zip him into a black bag. I signed papers at the hospital. I spent $180,000 on his funeral. I scattered his ashes at his family's property in Cape Cod on a freezing February morning, while our 2 children stood beside me, crying. I've been taking Xanax just to get out of bed for 8 months. I've had 3 therapists. I spent $47,000 trying to process the trauma of watching my husband die in front of me during what was supposed to be a peaceful Sunday breakfast. And yesterday, there he was, alive, sitting in an Italian restaurant 45 minutes from our home in Greenwich, smiling at a woman with light brown hair and 2 small children. I was in Westchester meeting a potential vendor for a charity project my daughter Simone convinced me to start. Something to give me purpose again, she'd said. Something to help me move forward. I'd parked across the street from the restaurant, checking the address on my phone, when I glanced up and saw him through the large front window. My hands started shaking so violently I dropped my phone. It clattered onto the floor of my Mercedes, but I couldn't look away from that window. He was cutting food on a little boy's plate. The child looked about 5 years old. Thomas always did that. When Garrett and Simone were small, he'd cut their food into perfect little pieces, patient and careful. The woman next to him touched his arm, said something that made him smile. He leaned over and kissed her cheek. Casual, comfortable, like they'd been together for years. I couldn't breathe. My vision tunneled. This wasn't possible. I'd watched him die. I'd identified his body. I'd planned his entire funeral, chosen the music, written his obituary. I'd spent 11 months drowning in grief so profound, I'd considered ending my own life 3 times. But that was his face, his hands, the way he held his fork. The scar between his thumb and index finger on his left hand from a boating accident in 1989. I could see it from across the street because the afternoon sun was hitting the window at exactly the right angle. I got out of my car. I don't remember deciding to move. One moment I was sitting there, frozen, and the next I was halfway across the street. A car honked. I barely heard it. I walked straight into that restaurant like I was being pulled by a rope. The hostess tried to stop me. "Ma'am, do you have a reservation?" I pushed past her. My heels clicked on the tile floor. The sound felt distant, like it was happening to someone else. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, louder than the Italian music playing from the speakers. I walked right up to their table. The woman looked up first, startled. The children stared at me. And Thomas, my dead husband. He looked up slowly, and his face went completely blank. "Thomas?" My voice cracked. I could feel tears already streaming down my face. My hands were shaking. "Thomas, oh my God, it's you. You're alive. How are you alive?" He stared at me like I was a stranger. No recognition in his eyes. None. His expression was cold, careful, completely controlled. This was a man who'd whispered, "I love you," every single morning for 34 years. Who'd held my hand through 2 difficult pregnancies. Who'd been my best friend since we were 23 years old. "I'm sorry," he said slowly. His voice. It was his voice. Exactly his voice. "I think you have me confused with someone else." "No." I shook my head frantically. "No, Thomas, it's me. It's Vivian, your wife. What's happening? Where have you been? We had a funeral. I scattered your ashes, the children." I was sobbing now, completely falling apart in the middle of this restaurant. Garrett and Simone, they've been devastated. We all have. How could you do this? The woman stood up, pulling the children closer to her. Michael, what's going on? Who is this woman? Michael. She'd called him Michael. I don't know her, Thomas said, still in that flat, emotionless voice. Ma'am, I'm very sorry, but my name is Michael Brennan. I've never seen you before in my life. I think you need to leave. Your hand. I pointed at it, my own hand trembling so badly I could barely control it. The scar, the boating accident, Cape Cod, 1989. You were 23. You needed 17 stitches. You have a small keloid scar right there between your thumb and index finger. He didn't move. Didn't react, just kept staring at me with those cold, empty eyes. That laugh, I said desperately. The way you laugh, the rasp at the end. You've always done that, since college. It's you. I know it's you. The manager appeared at my elbow. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. He's my husband, I screamed it, loud enough that every conversation in the restaurant stopped. He died 11 months ago. I watched him die. And now he's here with another woman and children, and he's pretending he doesn't know me. Ma'am, please. The manager took my arm, not rough, but firm. You need to leave right now, or I'm calling the police. I looked at Thomas one more time. Our eyes met. For just a fraction of a second, something flickered there. Fear, guilt, something. And then it was gone, and his face was blank again. Security is on the way, the manager said quietly. I let him walk me to the door. I could feel everyone staring. The woman was crying. One of the children was asking what was wrong. And Thomas just sat there, frozen, watching me leave. Outside, I stood on the sidewalk gasping for air. My makeup was running. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. A woman walking past asked if I was okay. I couldn't answer. I just stood there, staring at the restaurant window, watching Thomas talk to the woman, watching him comfort those children. I got back in my car. I couldn't drive. I sat there for 20 minutes just trying to breathe, trying to process what had just happened, trying to convince myself I wasn't having some kind of psychotic break, but I knew what I'd seen. That scar, his laugh, the way he moved, everything. It was Thomas, my Thomas, who was supposed to be dead, who I'd mourned for 11 months, who'd destroyed me so completely I barely recognized myself anymore. I waited. I don't know what I was thinking. I just knew I couldn't leave. Not until I understood what was happening. 3 hours later, as the sun was setting, Thomas walked out of the restaurant. The woman and children were with him. They walked to a Toyota SUV parked 6 spaces down from me. I slid down in my seat, watching. He opened the back door, helped the children with their seatbelts, patient, gentle, exactly the way he'd been with Garrett and Simone. The woman got in the passenger seat. Thomas closed her door, walked around to the driver's side, and that's when I turned on my phone's camera and got out of my car. I walked straight toward him. He saw me coming, his whole body tensed. I'm recording this, I said. My voice was steadier now. The shock had worn off, replaced by something harder. Anger. So you can't pretend this isn't happening. He glanced at the car. The woman was looking down at her phone. The children were already absorbed in tablets in the back seat. Vivian. My name in his mouth after 11 months. You need to leave. Right now. How am I standing here talking to my dead husband? I held the phone steady, pointed right at his face. Explain that to me, Thomas. My name is Michael Brennan. Your name is Thomas James Ashford. You were born on March 14th, 1967. Your mother's name was Elizabeth. Your father was Thomas Sr. You have a birthmark on your left shoulder blade that looks like Italy. You're allergic to shellfish. Your favorite movie is The Godfather Part 2. You proposed to me on a beach in Maine during a thunderstorm. We got married on October 7th, 1991. Should I keep going? His jaw clenched. You're having some kind of episode. Grief can do that. I'm sorry for whatever you're going through, but I'm not who you think I am. Show me your hand. I stepped closer. Show me that scar and tell me you're not Thomas Ashford. He looked at his hand, at that distinctive scar, and something in his face changed. Not much, just enough for me to see that he knew he was trapped. Please, he said quietly, you need to go. You don't understand what's happening here. Then explain it to me. I could feel tears again, hot and angry. Explain how you died in our kitchen, how I held you while you stopped breathing, how I buried you, how I've spent almost a year wanting to die because losing you destroyed me. Explain that, Thomas. He looked toward the car again. The woman was still on her phone. Not here, he said. Put the phone down and I'll talk to you, but not here, not in front of them. Why? Who are they? Who is she? It's complicated. You owe me an explanation. My voice broke. After what you've put me through, you owe me the truth. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out like he was going to touch my arm, but stopped himself. Tomorrow, noon. There's a coffee shop on Main Street in Stamford. Bennett's. Meet me there and I'll explain everything. But you can't come to my house. You can't contact me except there. And you can't tell anyone about this. Not yet. Please, Vivian. If you ever loved me, give me a chance to explain before you blow up everything. I did love you, I said. I loved you so much I didn't think I'd survive losing you. And apparently I didn't lose you at all. You just left. His face crumpled for just a second. Real emotion. Real pain. Then he controlled it again. Tomorrow, noon, please. The car door opened. The woman leaned out. Michael, is everything okay? Fine, he called back, just asking for directions. He looked at me one more time. Tomorrow, I'll tell you everything, I promise. He got in the car and drove away. I stood there in the parking lot with my phone in my hand, watching the taillights disappear. I'd been recording the entire time, 4 minutes and 17 seconds of my dead husband admitting he was alive. Admitting that everything I'd been through was based on a lie. I got in my car and drove straight to Manhattan, to Simone's apartment. I couldn't be alone with this. I couldn't process it by myself. If I tried, I'd either convince myself I was insane or I'd do something I couldn't take back. Simone opened her door, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside. Mom? What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost. I almost laughed. That's exactly what I'd seen. A ghost. My husband's ghost. Except he wasn't a ghost at all. He was alive and well and living a completely different life with a completely different family. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and showed her the video. We watched it together in complete silence. When it ended, Simone just stared at the screen. Her face had gone white. Mom, her voice was barely a whisper. That's Dad. I know. But that's impossible. We cremated him. We scattered his ashes. I know. She watched the video again. And again. And then she started crying. Not the kind of crying I'd done in the parking lot. This was silent, shocked tears running down her face while she tried to process something that didn't make any sense. How is this possible? She finally asked. How did he fake his death? Why would he fake his death? He said he'd explain tomorrow. He wants to meet me at a coffee shop in Stamford. Absolutely not. Simone's voice turned sharp, protective. You're not meeting him anywhere alone. I'm coming with you. Simone. No, you're not arguing with me about this. He's been lying to us for 11 months. He let us think he was dead. He watched us grieve. He's not trustworthy, and you're not meeting him alone. She wiped her face roughly. We need to call Garrett. It's late in Boston. He'll be asleep. I don't care. He needs to know about this, right now. She called him on speaker. It rang 4 times before Garrett answered, his voice thick with sleep. Simone? It's almost midnight. What's wrong? Dad's alive, Simone said. No build-up, no preparation, just the truth, flat and hard, silence on the other end. Then Garrett's voice, sharper now, fully awake. What are you talking about? Mom saw him today, in Westchester, at a restaurant, with another woman and 2 kids. She has video of him. It's definitely him, Garrett. It's Dad. More silence. Then, that's impossible. Mom, are you there? I'm here, I said quietly. You saw someone who looked like Dad. It's been a difficult year. Grief can cause... I know what grief looks like, Garrett. My voice came out harder than I meant it to. I've been living in it for 11 months. This wasn't a look-alike. This wasn't a hallucination. It was your father. He has the scar from the boating accident. His laugh, everything. I recorded him. He acknowledged me. He called me by name. He agreed to meet me tomorrow to explain. Send me the video, Garrett said. Simone sent it to him. We waited. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, then the sound of the video playing. The silence after it ended lasted forever. I'll be there tomorrow morning, Garrett finally said. His voice sounded hollow, broken. First train from Boston. Don't meet him without me. Don't do anything until I get there. Garrett, please, Mom, just wait for me. He hung up. Simone and I sat on her couch, staring at each other. Neither of us knew what to say. What do you say when your dead husband, your dead father, turns out to be alive? When everything you've grieved for wasn't real? When the worst day of your life was apparently just the beginning of a lie so big you can't even comprehend it yet? I spent that night on Simone's couch, not sleeping, just replaying every moment from the restaurant. Thomas's face when he saw me, the coldness in his eyes, the way he'd called himself Michael Brennan, the woman and the children, that whole other life he'd built. 11 months. He'd been alive for 11 months while I'd been dying inside, while I'd taken pills just to function, while I'd stood in our closet smelling his clothes and crying until I threw up, while our children had struggled through holidays without their father. And he'd been fine, happy even, laughing at a restaurant with a new family. The anger I felt in that moment was so intense, it scared me. This wasn't the sharp pain of grief I'd been living with. This was something else entirely, something cold and clear and absolute. Thomas Ashford had made me believe I was a widow. He'd let me suffer. He'd let our children suffer. And tomorrow he was going to tell me why. He was going to explain how someone could do something so cruel to the people who loved him most. And depending on what he said, depending on how he tried to justify the unjustifiable, I was going to decide what happened next. Because the woman who'd walked into that restaurant crying and begging for answers wasn't the same woman sitting on this couch now. That woman was broken, lost, drowning in grief and confusion. This woman was done being a victim. This woman wanted the truth. And this woman was going to make absolutely certain that Thomas Ashford paid for what he'd done. If you or someone you know is having a difficult time, free support is available. Find resources. Garrett arrived at Simone's apartment at 7:30 the next morning. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, suit wrinkled like he'd slept in it on the train. He didn't say anything when Simone opened the door. He just walked straight to me and wrapped his arms around me in a hug so tight I could barely breathe. My son, my firstborn, 32 years old, 6 feet tall, always so controlled and measured. And he was shaking. I watched that video 20 times, he said into my shoulder. I keep thinking I'm going to see something different. Some proof that it's not him. But it is. It's Dad. We sat at Simone's small kitchen table, the 3 of us, drinking coffee none of us really wanted. Nobody knew what to say. What conversation do you have when your entire reality has been rewritten overnight? Tell me everything, Garrett finally said. From the beginning. What were you doing in Westchester? So I told them. About the charity project Simone had suggested. about pulling up to check the address and happening to glance through that restaurant window at exactly the wrong moment. Or the right moment. I still didn't know which. I thought I was losing my mind, I said. In that first second, I actually thought the grief had finally broken something in my brain, that I was hallucinating. I wish you had been, Simone said quietly. That would be easier than this. Garrett was in lawyer mode now. I could see it in his face. The shock was still there, but he was compartmentalizing it, trying to analyze the situation logically. We need to think about what this means legally. If he faked his death, there are serious criminal implications, fraud, possibly insurance fraud if there were any life insurance policies, document forgery for the death certificate. There was life insurance, I said. $2 million, but I haven't touched it. It's still sitting in the account where it was deposited. Did you receive any other death benefits, Social Security, pension payouts? I shook my head. He was only 58, no pension yet, and I never applied for Social Security survivors' benefits. We didn't need the money. The consultancy sale left me with more than enough. Garrett nodded slowly, processing. That might help if this goes legal. You didn't benefit financially from his supposed death. But Mom, the cremation. How did that happen? You can't just fake a body. That's when the full weight of it really hit me. The logistics of what Thomas had done. This wasn't some impulsive decision. This was planned, meticulously, carefully, far enough in advance to arrange everything. Dr. Hastings signed the death certificate, I said slowly, remembering. Leonard Hastings, the cardiologist. He was at the emergency room when the ambulance brought Thomas in. He told me it was a massive cerebral aneurysm, that there was nothing anyone could have done. You need to get that death certificate, Garrett said, and any other documents from that day, hospital records, everything. The funeral home, Simone added. They handled the cremation. They must have records, too. But as I sat there thinking about it, I realized how little I'd actually seen. I'd been so destroyed by grief that I'd let other people handle everything. The hospital had given me papers to sign. I'd signed them. The funeral director had made suggestions. I'd agreed to all of them. Thomas's body had been in a closed casket at the wake because Dr. Hastings had said the aneurysm caused too much damage for an open viewing. I'd accepted that without question. I'd identified him at the hospital, yes, but I'd been sobbing so hard I could barely see, and it had been his face, his body, his clothes. Or I'd thought it was. What if it hadn't been? What if that was part of the lie, too? How much did the funeral cost? Garrett asked. $180,000. The casket alone was $45,000. He wanted mahogany. He'd told me that years ago. If anything ever happened to him, he wanted mahogany. Garrett and Simone exchanged a look. What? I asked. That's an expensive casket for a body that was going to be cremated, Garrett said carefully. Usually people choose something simpler if cremation is planned. I felt sick. He told me, years ago. We were at his uncle's funeral, and he made some comment about how ugly the casket was. He said when his time came, he wanted mahogany. I was just honoring what he'd wanted. Or what he'd planned. What he'd set up years in advance, knowing I'd remember that conversation. Knowing I'd spend a fortune on a casket that would make the closed viewing seem more legitimate. We should go, Simone said, checking her phone. It's almost 11. We need to get to Stamford. The drive was quiet. Garrett insisted on driving, which was good because my hands were still shaking. I sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, trying to remember details from that terrible morning, 11 months ago. It had been a Sunday. January 22nd. I remembered the date because it was exactly 1 month after our 34th wedding anniversary. Thomas had been making eggs Benedict, my favorite. He made them every few Sundays, had the recipe perfected. Hollandaise sauce from scratch, Canadian bacon, perfectly poached eggs. He'd been cheerful that morning. I remembered that clearly now, happy, relaxed. We'd been talking about a trip to Italy we were planning for the spring, Rome, Florence, the Amalfi Coast. He'd been researching hotels, And then he just collapsed. One moment he was whisking hollandaise sauce, the next he was on the floor. No warning, no grabbing his head or saying he felt dizzy. Just down. I'd screamed, called 911. The paramedics arrived in 6 minutes. They'd worked on him right there in our kitchen, but it was already too late. He was gone. Or I'd thought he was gone. Had he taken something? Some drug that simulated the symptoms of an aneurysm? How would you even do that? And the paramedics, the doctors, Dr. Hastings, were they all in on it? Or had Thomas fooled them too somehow? Mom. Simone's voice from the back seat pulled me out of my thoughts. Whatever he says today, whatever his explanation is, remember that he made a choice. He chose to do this to us, to you. Nothing he says can justify that. I nodded, but I wasn't sure I believed it yet. Part of me, the part that had loved Thomas for 34 years, still wanted there to be some good reason, some explanation that would make this make sense, some proof that the man I'd married wasn't capable of this level of cruelty. But another part of me, the part that had been growing stronger since yesterday, knew better. There was no good reason for what he'd done, no explanation that would make it okay. He'd chosen to destroy me, to destroy our children, and he'd done it knowing exactly what it would cost us. We pulled into the parking lot of Bennett's coffee shop at 11:45. It was a small place, brick front, large windows showing tables inside, not crowded, a few people working on laptops, a couple in the corner sharing a muffin. "I'll go in alone first," I said. "Absolutely not," Garrett said immediately. "He agreed to meet me, not all of us. If he sees you two, he might run." "Then let him run," Simone said. "We have the video. We have proof. We can go to the police right now if we want to." I need to hear what he has to say. I looked at both of them. I need to understand why. And I need to do it without you two there, because if you're there, he won't talk. He'll be defensive. He'll shut down. Please, let me do this my way. Garrett didn't like it. I could see it all over his face, but he finally nodded. "We'll be right outside. Any sign of trouble, any sign that you need us, and we're coming in." I got out of the car. My legs felt shaky as I walked to the coffee shop door. The bell chimed when I opened it, and several people looked up. None of them were Thomas. I ordered a black coffee I didn't want and sat at a table near the back where I could see the door. 12:02, 12:05, 12:10. Maybe he wasn't coming. Maybe yesterday's agreement had been just another lie to get me to leave him alone. At 12:13, the door opened. And there he was. My dead husband, wearing jeans and a dark blue sweater I'd never seen before. His hair was different. Darker. He'd dyed it, trying to look less recognizable maybe, less like Thomas Ashford. Our eyes met across the coffee shop. He looked older than I remembered, tired. There were lines around his mouth I didn't recognize. He walked slowly to my table and sat down across from me without saying anything. We stared at each other for a long moment. This close, in good light, there was no question. It was him. Every feature, every line. The tiny scar above his left eyebrow from when Garrett had accidentally hit him with a toy truck when he was 3. The slight bump in his nose from breaking it playing basketball in high school. "Hi, Viv," he finally said. And his voice saying my name, the nickname only he used, broke something in me all over again. "Don't call me that." My voice came out cold, hard. "You lost the right to call me that when you let me believe you were dead." He flinched, actually flinched. "Fair enough. Explain." I leaned forward. "Right now, explain how this is possible. Explain how you could do this to me, to Garrett and Simone. Explain everything, Thomas. And it better be the truth, because I have that video from yesterday and I have 2 very angry children sitting in a car outside who want me to go straight to the police." He looked down at his hands, at that scar. "It's complicated." "Then uncomplicated." He took a breath. let it out slowly. And then he started talking. And everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, my husband, shattered into pieces I would never be able to put back together the same way again. There was fraud at the firm, Thomas said quietly, still not meeting my eyes. Massive fraud. $43 million in misappropriated client funds over 6 years. Complex accounting manipulation, shell companies, offshore accounts. The kind of thing that destroys lives and ends careers. I waited. My coffee sat untouched between us, getting cold. I found out about it in October, 2 months before I died. He said the word died with no inflection, like it was just a fact. I was reviewing acquisition documents for a client and noticed discrepancies in the numbers. Small things at first, but when I started digging deeper, I found the whole scheme. And you reported it, I said. Not a question, because that's what the Thomas I knew would have done. He finally looked up at me. I tried to. I went to the managing partners, showed them everything I'd found, all the evidence. And they told me that if I pursued it, if I made it public, I'd be the one who went down for it. I felt my jaw tighten. What are you talking about? Robert was behind it. He said the name like it tasted bitter. Robert Ashford III, my father's cousin, the managing partner, the man who gave me my first job out of business school, who mentored me, who helped rebuild the Ashford name after my father's bankruptcy destroyed it. I remembered Robert, distinguished, silver-haired, always impeccably dressed. He'd been at our wedding, at both children's baptisms. I'd had dinner with him and his wife at least once a month for years. Robert set it up so that all the documentation led back to me, Thomas continued. My digital signature on transfers, my authorization codes. He'd been systematically building a paper trail for years, maybe since he first started the fraud. If it came out, I'd be the one facing federal charges. 7 to 12 years minimum. Complete destruction of reputation, criminal record, everything. You had evidence it was him, I said. You said you found the whole scheme. I had evidence, yes, but Robert had connections, federal prosecutors, judges, people who owed him favors. He made it very clear that if I tried to expose him, he'd crush me. He'd make absolutely certain I took the fall. And more than that. Thomas's voice dropped even lower. He said he'd make sure the investigation included you, your consultancy. He'd manufacture evidence that you were involved, that we'd been working together to launder money through your business. I felt ice in my stomach. That's insane. My business was completely legitimate. I know that. But Robert could make it look otherwise. He showed me documents he'd already prepared. Fake invoices from your company to shell corporations. Backdated contracts. It was all fiction, but it looked real enough to trigger an investigation. And even if you were eventually cleared, the damage would be done. Your reputation destroyed. Your clients gone. Everything you'd built for 30 years, gone. I stared at him. So your solution was to fake your death. My solution was to protect you. His voice had an edge now, defensive. I couldn't expose Robert without destroying both of us. I couldn't stay and wait for the investigation to eventually catch up. The SEC was already starting to ask questions. It was only a matter of months before everything exploded. So I found a third option. You found a way to abandon your family. I found a way to save my family. He said it too loud. Several people in the coffee shop looked over. Thomas lowered his voice again. If I'd stayed, we all would have gone down. You, me, our children's reputations, everything. But if I died, the investigation would have no target. It would fizzle out. And it did. They questioned Robert for a few weeks after my death, but without anyone to prosecute, they moved on. You could have told me, I said. Each word felt like broken glass in my throat. You could have trusted me with the truth. We could have figured it out together. No, we couldn't. He shook his head. Because you would have wanted to fight. You would have wanted to hire lawyers and expose Robert and go to war. That's who you are, Viv. Vivian. You're a fighter, and that fight would have destroyed you. So instead, you destroyed me a different way. He looked down again. I thought it would be cleaner, quicker. Grief is hard, but it ends eventually. People move on. I thought you'd mourn for a year, maybe 2, and then you'd rebuild your life. You're strong. You've always been strong. I almost laughed. The sound came out harsh and broken. You thought grief ends? You thought I'd just move on from watching my husband die in my arms? Thomas, I've been in hell for 11 months. Actual hell. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I've been taking anxiety medication just to function. I spent $47,000 on therapy. I stopped seeing friends because I couldn't handle their pity. I stopped doing anything except existing because the pain of losing you was so enormous it swallowed everything else. Something shifted in his face, real emotion breaking through. I didn't know it would be that bad. You didn't know? What did you think would happen when your wife of 34 years watched you collapse and die? When she had to identify your body? When she had to tell her children their father was dead? You didn't think that might be traumatic? I thought you'd be sad, of course. But I also thought you'd be practical. You always are. I thought you'd grieve, and then you'd remember that you have resources, you have children, you have a full life ahead of you. I thought you'd be okay. Well, I wasn't. I could feel tears threatening, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of him. And neither were Garrett and Simone. Garrett became obsessed with work, threw himself into his career so he wouldn't have to feel anything. Simone couldn't sleep in her own apartment for months. She kept having panic attacks. Our children needed their father, and you let them think you were gone. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I saw Simone. Once. About 3 months after I died. I was in Manhattan for something, and I saw her walking down the street. She looked thin, tired. I almost went up to her, almost told her everything right there. But I couldn't, because telling her would mean dragging her into the lie, making her complicit. So I just watched her walk away. How noble of you, I said flatly. I'm not saying I made the right choice. His voice was rough now. I'm saying I made the only choice I could see at the time. I was trapped. Robert had me cornered. And I thought if I removed myself from the equation, everyone else would be safe. Everyone else is not safe, Thomas. Everyone else is traumatized. Your children are traumatized. I'm traumatized. And now that I know the truth, now that I know you chose to do this, it's somehow even worse. I didn't choose this lightly. He leaned forward. Do you think I wanted to leave you? Leave our kids? I spent 2 months trying to find another way. Any other way. But there wasn't one. Robert had covered every angle. And the thought of you visiting me in prison for 10 years, of our children growing up with a father who was a convicted felon, of watching everything we'd built crumble, I couldn't do that to you. So you did this instead. Yes, I did this instead. I sat back in my chair, trying to process everything he'd said, trying to find holes in his story, trying to understand how the man I'd loved could rationalize something so completely devastating. The cremation, I said. How did you fake that? He hesitated. You don't need to know the details. Yes, I do. You owe me details, Thomas. All of them. How did you fake your death? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. Dr. Hastings, Leonard Hastings. He has gambling debts, serious ones. Owes money to people who don't negotiate. I paid off his debts. $180,000. In exchange, he falsified my death certificate and medical records. And the body? There was no body. The paramedics who came to the house that morning, they were real. But I'd taken a drug that simulated cardiac arrest. slowed my heart rate to almost nothing, made me appear dead. They took me to the hospital. Hastings was waiting. He pronounced me dead, put me in the morgue, and that night, when the hospital was quiet, I walked out. I felt nauseous. And the funeral home? The funeral director is Hastings's brother-in-law. He was the one who suggested the closed casket, said the aneurysm had caused too much damage. There was never a body in that casket, Vivian. It was weighted to feel right, but it was empty. And the cremation, those ashes you scattered, they weren't me. They were from a pet crematorium, dogs, cats, whatever was available. I couldn't speak, couldn't process what he was telling me. The level of deception, the planning, the number of people involved. How much did it cost? I finally asked, including Hastings, the funeral director, the documents for my new identity, and paying off various other people who needed to be quiet. About $600,000. Where did you get $600,000 without me noticing? He looked away. I'd been setting money aside for years, small amounts, offshore accounts, nothing you'd see in our regular finances. For years. The words came out sharp. You've been planning this for years? No, not this specifically. But I always kept emergency funds, separate resources. My father lost everything when his business collapsed. I watched him go from wealthy to bankrupt in 6 months. I swore I'd never be that vulnerable, so I always kept money aside, just in case. Just in case you needed to fake your death and abandon your family. Just in case something went wrong, he said firmly. And something did go wrong. I'm not proud of what I did, Vivian, but I'm not sorry I protected you. You didn't protect me. I said it too loud again, but I didn't care anymore. You destroyed me. You made me believe I was a widow. You made me second-guess every moment of our marriage. I spent months wondering if I'd missed signs, if there was something I could have done differently, if somehow I'd failed you. And all of that was based on a lie. I never wanted you to feel that way. But you knew I would. You knew exactly what grief looks like, what it does to people, and you did it anyway. He didn't have an answer for that. He just sat there, looking at his hands. Who's Rachel? I asked. The woman at the restaurant. Who is she? Thomas's face changed, softened slightly. She's a pediatric nurse. Her husband died 2 years ago in a car accident. She has 2 kids. James is 7, Emma is 5. And she has no idea who you really are. I told her my name is Michael Brennan, that I'm a financial consultant, that my wife died of cancer 3 years ago. We met in a grief support group 9 months ago. She was struggling. I was lonely. We started talking. It developed into something more. You went to a grief support group. I said it slowly, making sure I understood. You sat with people who were actually grieving, who had actually lost people, and you pretended to be one of them, while your actual wife was at home taking pills to cope with losing you. I know how it sounds. Do you? Do you really? Because it sounds like you didn't just fake your death. You used other people's genuine pain to build your cover story. You manipulated a widow. You inserted yourself into those children's lives. For what? Companionship? Because you were lonely? Because I'm human, he said quietly. Because I spent 34 years being Thomas Ashford, and suddenly I was nobody. Michael Brennan with no history, no connections, no life. And yes, I was lonely. I was living in a small apartment in Westchester, working remotely for a consulting firm under a fake resume. No friends, no family, nothing. And then I met Rachel, and she was kind. She didn't know anything about Thomas Ashford or Robert or any of it. She just knew Michael, this guy who'd lost his wife and understood what she was going through. Except you hadn't lost anyone. I'd lost everyone, he said. I'd lost you. I'd lost Garrett and Simone. I'd lost my entire life. Maybe I didn't lose it through death, but I lost it. By choice. You lost it by choice, Thomas. That's the difference. Rachel lost her husband in an accident. I lost my husband to a lie. Those are not the same thing. He was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "Are you going to tell her?" "I don't know yet. That depends on what happens next." "What do you mean?" I pulled out my phone and set it on the table between us. "I recorded our conversation yesterday in the parking lot. I have you on video admitting you faked your death. I have enough information now to go to the police, to the FBI, to expose everything." His face went pale. "Vivienne, please." "Please what? Please keep your secret? Please let you keep living your nice, quiet life with your new family while I deal with the wreckage you left behind. If you expose this, it doesn't just hurt me. It hurts Rachel. Those kids. They'll lose another father figure. Rachel will find out she's been lied to for 9 months. And yes, it hurts me. I'll go to prison. For a long time. Fraud, falsifying documents, all of it. Is that what you want?" "I don't know what I want," I said honestly. "Yesterday I wanted you back. I wanted my husband back. I wanted my life back. But now I know that none of that was real. So I don't know what I want anymore." "I made a mistake," Thomas said. "A huge mistake. I see that now. But you have to understand, I was backed into a corner. I was facing prison or death or this, and this seemed like the option that would hurt the least people. You were wrong. I know. I know I was wrong. But please, Vivienne, think about what exposing this will do. It won't just affect me. Your children will have to deal with the media attention, with knowing their father is alive, but also a criminal. The story will be everywhere. Every detail of our marriage will be picked apart. Is that really what you want?" He was right about that, at least. I could already see the headlines, the news coverage, my private pain becoming public spectacle, Garrett's law career potentially affected, Simone having to answer questions from colleagues and friends. But I could also see what letting him get away with this would mean. Living with the knowledge that he'd destroyed me and faced no consequences. Watching him continue his life with Rachel and those children while I picked up the pieces of mine. Knowing that he'd literally gotten away with murder. His own murder. "I need time," I said finally. "I need time to think, to decide what to do." "How much time?" "I don't know. A few days, a week maybe. And in the meantime, you go back to your life as Michael Brennan. You don't contact me. You don't try to run. Because if you disappear, I go straight to the police with everything I have. Understood?" He nodded slowly. Understood. And Thomas. I leaned forward. If I decide to expose this, if I decide that's what needs to happen, I want you to know why. It won't be about revenge. It won't be about hurting you. It'll be because what you did was wrong. Fundamentally, completely wrong. And sometimes wrong things need to have consequences. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you've convinced yourself this was some kind of noble sacrifice, that you were protecting me, but you weren't. You were protecting yourself. From prison, yes, but also from having to face what you'd done, from having to watch me suffer through a trial, from having to be present for the hard parts. You took the easy way out and told yourself it was heroic. His face crumpled slightly. Maybe you're right. Maybe I was protecting myself too. But that doesn't change the fact that if I'd stayed, we all would have suffered more. We'll never know that, I said, because you didn't give us the choice. You decided for all of us, and that's the part I don't think I can forgive. I stood up. My untouched coffee sat cold on the table between us. "I'll be in touch," I said. "Don't try to find me. Don't call. Don't show up at the house. When I've decided what to do, I'll let you know." Vivienne. He stood too. "For what it's worth, I did love you. I do love you. Everything we had was real. The marriage, the kids, all of it. That part wasn't a lie." I looked at him for a long moment. At this man I'd spent 34 years with, who I'd built a life with, who I'd trusted completely. and I realized I didn't know him at all. Maybe I never had. The worst lies are the ones we tell ourselves, I said quietly. You've convinced yourself you did this out of love. But love doesn't destroy people, Thomas. Love doesn't make someone believe they're a widow and then let them suffer for almost a year. Whatever you felt for me, whatever you think you felt, it wasn't love. It was cowardice dressed up as sacrifice, and I think, deep down, you know that. I walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. Garrett and Simone were waiting by the car, their faces anxious. They both started talking at once, asking questions, but I held up my hand. Get in the car, I said. I'll explain everything. But first we need to go somewhere. There's someone we need to talk to. Who? Simone asked. Dr. Leonard Hastings, I said. The man who helped my husband fake his death, and the man who's going to give me every single detail of how he did it. Dr. Leonard Hastings lived in a sprawling colonial in Old Greenwich, the kind of house that screamed old money and established reputation. Manicured lawn, black shutters, a BMW in the circular driveway. The kind of life you build over decades of being a respected cardiologist. The kind of life that could crumble in an instant if the truth came out. I rang the doorbell at 3:15 in the afternoon. Garrett and Simone stood behind me, silent. We'd spent the drive from Stamford planning this, deciding what to say, how much to reveal. Garrett wanted to go straight to the police, but I'd convinced him to wait. We needed more information first. We needed to understand the full scope of what Thomas had done. A woman answered the door. Mid-50s, blonde hair in a neat bob, yoga pants and a cashmere sweater. Mrs. Hastings, presumably. Can I help you? She asked pleasantly. I need to speak with Dr. Hastings, I said. It's urgent. About a patient. Leonard's at the hospital until 6. Can I take a message? It's about Thomas Ashford, I said, watching her face carefully. Nothing. No recognition. No reaction. She genuinely didn't know the name. I'm sorry, I don't know that name. If you'd like to make an appointment, you can call his office tomorrow. Tell him Vivian Ashford came by, I said. Tell him Thomas's widow. And tell him I'll be back at 7 o'clock tonight. If he's not here, I'll be going to the medical board with some very interesting information about how death certificates are issued. Her pleasant expression faltered. I'm sorry, what? 7 o'clock, I repeated. He'll understand. We left her standing in the doorway, confusion and concern written all over her face. Good. Let her ask her husband questions. Let him squirm for a few hours, wondering what I knew and what I was planning to do with it. We got coffee at a diner and waited. None of us ate, though the waitress kept trying to push pie on us. Simone was on her laptop, researching Dr. Hastings. Garrett was making notes on a legal pad, building what he called the case, even though we didn't know yet if there would be a case. And I sat there thinking about Thomas's face when I'd told him I needed time. The fear in his eyes, the desperation. He knew he'd made a mistake meeting me, knew he'd given me power over him. And now he was probably sitting in his apartment in Westchester, wondering if his entire new life was about to explode. Part of me felt satisfaction in that. He'd spent 11 months free and comfortable while I'd suffered. Now he could spend a few days suffering instead. But another part of me just felt empty, hollowed out. Like everything I'd believed about my life, my marriage, my judgment of character, had been scraped away, leaving nothing but raw confusion. At 6:55, we pulled back into Dr. Hastings's driveway. His BMW was still there, joined now by a Mercedes SUV. The house was fully lit. Through the front window, I could see movement, people talking. This time, when I rang the doorbell, Dr. Hastings himself answered. He was tall, gray-haired, distinguished-looking in the way only doctors and professors manage to be. He wore reading glasses pushed up on his head and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked tired. "Mrs. Ashford," he said quietly, "please come in." We followed him into a study lined with bookshelves and leather furniture. Medical journals stacked on the desk, framed diplomas on the walls, the accumulation of a successful, respected career. He closed the door and turned to face us. My wife is upstairs. She doesn't know anything about this. I'd appreciate if it stayed that way. That depends on what you tell us, Garrett said, and whether it's the truth. Dr. Hastings looked at him, then at Simone, then at me. You're Thomas's children. We were, Simone said coldly, until you helped him fake his death and destroy our family. He winced, actually winced. I'm not proud of what I did. But you did it anyway, I said. For money. How much? $180,000. He sat down heavily in his desk chair. I had gambling debts, serious ones, to people who don't forgive or forget. Thomas found out somehow. He approached me with an offer. He'd pay off my debts, all of them. In exchange, I'd falsify his death certificate and medical records. And you agreed. I tried to keep my voice steady. You're a doctor. You took an oath, and you agreed to help someone fake their death. I was desperate, he said. The people I owed money to had made it very clear what would happen if I didn't pay. I have a wife, 2 grandchildren. I couldn't let them get hurt because of my mistakes. So you let me get hurt instead. He looked down at his hands. I told myself you'd be fine, that you were wealthy, that you had resources, that grief is temporary. I told myself a lot of things to make it easier to live with what I'd done. Tell me exactly how you did it, I said. Every detail. The drug he took, the fake records, all of it. He took a breath. Thomas researched it himself, found a pharmaceutical cocktail that would simulate cardiac arrest, slow his heart rate to the point where it would be undetectable without specialized equipment. The paramedics who responded were legitimate. They genuinely thought he was dead. When they brought him to the emergency room, I was waiting. I'd made sure I was the attending physician on duty. I examined him, pronounced him dead, and had him moved to the morgue. And then at 2 a.m, when the hospital was quiet, I went to the morgue and removed him. Took him out through a service entrance. He'd left clothes and a car in the parking garage. He changed, left, and that was it. I never saw him again. The death certificate, Garrett said. You signed it. I did. I falsified the cause of death as cerebral aneurysm, created a complete medical file to support it. As far as any official record shows, Thomas Ashford died of natural causes on January 22nd. And the funeral home? I asked. My brother-in-law, Marcus. He runs Riverside Funeral Home. I told him the situation. He was reluctant, but Thomas paid him $50,000. Marcus handled the fake body, the closed casket viewing, the cremation, or what you thought was a cremation. Simone made a sound of disgust. How many people were involved in this? Just the 3 of us, Dr. Hastings said. Thomas, me, and Marcus. That's it. The fewer people who knew, the safer everyone was. Safer, I repeated. The word felt like acid in my mouth. You think what you did made anyone safer? I think I made a terrible choice under terrible circumstances, he said. And I've regretted it every single day since. When I saw the obituary, when I read about the funeral, when I thought about you and your children grieving. I almost came forward a dozen times. But you didn't. No, I didn't. Because I was a coward. Because I'd already committed the crime and coming forward wouldn't undo what I'd done. It would just destroy more lives. Mine. Marcus's. Our families. What about my life? I asked. What about my children's lives? Did those matter? Of course they mattered, but by then it was too late. The damage was done. I stood up, walked to his bookshelf, ran my finger along the spines of medical journals and textbooks, the collected knowledge of decades. Here's what's going to happen, I said, turning back to face him. You're going to write down everything you just told us, every detail, every name, every dollar amount. You're going to document exactly how you helped Thomas Ashford fake his death, and you're going to sign it. Mrs. Ashford, I'm not finished. My voice was harder now, sharper. You're going to do this because if you don't, I'm going to the medical board tomorrow morning. I'm going to the police. I'm going to the FBI. And I'm going to make absolutely certain that you lose everything, your license, your reputation, your freedom, all of it. If you do that, you'll expose Thomas too, he said. You'll have to explain how you know all this. It becomes a criminal investigation. Your husband goes to prison. Is that what you want? I don't know yet, I said honestly. But what I do know is that I want the truth, all of it, documented, so that when I decide what to do next, I have every piece of information I need to make that decision. Dr. Hastings looked at Garrett. You're a lawyer. You understand. If I write this down, I'm confessing to multiple felonies. I'm giving you evidence that will destroy me. Yes, Garrett said. You are. And if I refuse? Then we leave here and go straight to the authorities with what we know. You'll be investigated either way. But if you cooperate now, if you give us the full truth, maybe that counts for something when this all comes out. Maybe it doesn't. But at least you'll have done one honest thing. The silence stretched out. Dr. Hastings sat there, staring at his desk, his entire future hanging in the balance. Finally, he opened a drawer and pulled out a legal pad. I'll need an hour, he said, to write it all down properly. We'll wait, I said. And doctor, don't leave anything out, because if I find out later that you lied or omitted something important, I promise you, there won't be any mercy. He nodded and started writing. I watched him for a moment, this man who'd helped destroy my life for money, who'd looked at my grief and decided it was an acceptable price for his own comfort. And I felt something shift inside me, something cold and clear and absolutely certain. Thomas thought he'd protected me by leaving, thought he'd spared me from something worse, but what he'd actually done was strip away every illusion I'd had, about him, about our marriage, about my own judgment. And now, with Dr. Hastings' confession in hand, I was going to make absolutely certain that the truth had consequences for everyone involved. Dr. Hastings' confession was 11 pages long, single-spaced, every detail of the conspiracy laid out in his careful physician's handwriting. The pharmaceutical cocktail Thomas had used, the exact timing of events that morning. The bank account numbers where the money had been transferred, Marcus's role at the funeral home. The fake medical records he'd created and filed, all of it, signed and dated at the bottom of every page. Garrett photographed each page with his phone while Simone recorded Dr. Hastings reading the confession aloud. We weren't taking any chances. If he tried to recant later, we'd have multiple forms of evidence. What happens now? Dr. Hastings asked when we were finished. He looked 10 years older than when we'd arrived. Broken. Now we leave, I said. And you wait. Just like I'm waiting. Just like Thomas is waiting. You all get to live with the uncertainty for a while. See how it feels. We drove back to Greenwich in silence. It was almost 10 at night by the time we pulled into my driveway. The house looked dark and empty. I hadn't been able to stay here much since Thomas died. Too many memories. Too much pain. Simone had been staying with me on and off, but mostly I'd been living like a ghost in my own home. What are you going to do? Simone asked as we sat in the car, none of us making a move to get out. I don't know yet, I said. I need to think. I need to figure out what the right thing is here. The right thing is turning him in, Garrett said. Mom, he committed fraud, multiple felonies. He destroyed our family. There has to be consequences. I know, but it's not that simple. Why not? Because Rachel and those children are innocent. Because exposing Thomas means exposing Dr. Hastings, which means his wife finds out her husband is a criminal. His grandchildren find out their grandfather falsified records. Marcus at the funeral home goes down too. This doesn't just affect Thomas. It affects dozens of people. That's not your responsibility, Garrett said firmly. Thomas made these choices. He involved these people. Their consequences are on him, not you. But I'm the one who has to decide whether to pull the trigger, I said. I'm the one who has to live with whatever happens next. Simone reached forward from the back seat and squeezed my shoulder. Whatever you decide, we're with you. You know that, right? This is your choice to make, not ours, yours. I nodded, feeling tears threaten again. I need a few days, alone, to think through everything. Mom, please, I love you both. But I need space right now. I need to process this without anyone else's opinions or advice, just me and my own thoughts. They didn't like it, but they understood. They hugged me, made me promise to call if I needed anything, and finally left. Garrett back to Boston, Simone to her apartment in Manhattan, and I was alone in the house I'd shared with Thomas for 34 years. I walked through it slowly, every room full of memories that now felt contaminated. The kitchen where he'd died, the bedroom where we'd slept beside each other for decades, his office exactly as he'd left it. I'd preserved everything like a shrine, unable to let go. Now I wanted to burn it all down, but instead, I did something else. I went to his office and started going through his files, his computer, looking for evidence of what he'd told me at the coffee shop, looking for proof of Robert Ashford's fraud, looking for anything that would help me understand what had really happened. It took me 3 days, 3 days of barely sleeping, barely eating, just searching. And finally, on an old external hard drive hidden in the back of his desk drawer, I found it. Files and files of financial records, emails, spreadsheet analyses, all of it documenting exactly what Thomas had told me. Robert Ashford's fraud scheme, $43 million in misappropriated funds, shell companies, offshore accounts. And yes, documents showing how Robert had systematically framed Thomas as the fall guy. But I also found something else, something Thomas hadn't mentioned. Evidence that Thomas himself had been skimming money, not on Robert's scale, only $4.2 million over 6 years. But still, he'd been stealing too. Maybe he'd planned to use it to expose Robert, maybe he'd planned to use it as leverage, or maybe he'd just decided that if he was going down, he might as well profit first. I found the offshore account records. Account opened 3 weeks before his death. $4.2 million transferred in a series of small transactions that wouldn't trigger any alerts. Thomas hadn't just faked his death to protect me from Robert's scheme. He'd also done it to protect himself from his own theft, and to escape with the money. The noble sacrifice story he'd sold me at the coffee shop was a lie, or at least only part of the truth. I sat in his office chair, staring at the evidence on the screen, and felt something break inside me. The last, tiny piece of me that had wanted to believe he'd done this out of love, out of some misguided attempt to protect me. That piece shattered. He'd done it for himself, for money, for freedom. And he'd let me suffer because it was convenient. I called Thomas. He answered on the second ring, his voice tense. "Vivienne?" "I found the money," I said. $4.2 million in the Cayman account. Want to explain that? Silence. Long enough that I thought he might have hung up. "I was going to tell you," he finally said. "When? After you'd spent it all on your new life?" "It wasn't like that. I needed resources. I couldn't start over with nothing. You told me you did this to protect me, to protect our family. But you did it to protect yourself and your stolen money." "Both things can be true," he said. "Yes, I took money, but I also saved you from the investigation, from Robert." "I want that money back," I said. "All of it, transferred to an account I specify. You have 24 hours. Vivienne, that money is how I've been living, how I've been supporting myself. I don't care. You stole it, from clients ultimately, and now you're giving it back, to me, and I'll decide what to do with it. Maybe I'll return it to the defrauded clients. Maybe I'll donate it. Maybe I'll keep it as compensation for the 11 months of hell you put me through, but it's not yours anymore. If I transfer it, it creates a paper trail, evidence of the fraud. Good. That's exactly what I want. Evidence. Transfer it, Thomas. Or I go to the FBI tomorrow with everything I have. You're bluffing. Am I? You want to take that chance? I have Dr. Hastings' full confession. I have your financial records. I have video of you admitting you faked your death. I have enough to bury you, so transfer the money. Now. Another long silence. Then, I'll need a few hours to access the account. You have until noon tomorrow. I'll send you the account information. And Thomas? This is your last chance to do the right thing. The only chance you're going to get. I hung up before he could respond. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in 11 months. I called Robert Ashford's office and made an appointment to see him. His assistant was surprised to hear from me. Mrs. Ashford? Of course. How are you doing? We've all been thinking of you. I'm well, thank you. I need to speak with Robert, today if possible. It's about Thomas's estate. She found me a slot at 2 o'clock. I dressed carefully, my best suit, hair and makeup perfect, the version of myself I used to be, before grief broke me down. Robert's office was on the 42nd floor of a building in Midtown, glass and steel and expensive art. The view stretched all the way to the harbor. His assistant brought me coffee in a china cup and told me Robert would be with me shortly. He came out personally to greet me, still distinguished, still impeccably dressed. He hugged me, held my hands, told me how sorry he was for my loss, how Thomas had been like a son to him, every word a lie. "What can I do for you, Vivian?" he asked once we were seated in his office. "You mentioned Thomas's estate?" "I've been going through his files," I said, "getting everything organized, and I found some interesting documents, financial records from the firm, analysis of client accounts. I wanted to ask you about them." Something flickered in his eyes. "What kind of records?" I pulled out a folder, printouts of some of the evidence I'd found. Not all of it, just enough to let him know I had it. His face went carefully blank as he looked through the pages. "Where did you get these?" "Thomas's computer, hidden files. He'd been collecting evidence about fraud at the firm. $43 million in misappropriated funds, shell companies, offshore accounts, all of it. These documents are confidential firm property," Robert said. His voice had gone cold. "You shouldn't have them. And yet I do, along with evidence that you were systematically framing Thomas to take the fall if this ever came to light." He set the papers down carefully. "Vivian, you're grieving. You're not thinking clearly. These are complex financial matters that you don't understand. Don't patronize me, Robert. I built a $47 million consultancy from nothing. I understand finance perfectly well. And I understand fraud when I see it." "What do you want?" he asked bluntly. "The truth. Did you frame Thomas?" "Your husband was involved in activities at this firm that were inappropriate. I was attempting to document that when he unfortunately passed away." "Inappropriate activities that you orchestrated, using his codes, his authorizations, setting him up." Robert leaned back in his chair. "You have no proof of that." "Actually, I do. Thomas documented everything. Every instance where you used his credentials. Every fake authorization. He built a comprehensive case." "Then why didn't he come forward when he was alive?" Robert's voice had an edge now, dangerous. "Because you threatened him, threatened me, said you'd manufacture evidence that my company was involved in money laundering." "That's absurd." "Is it?" "Thomas seemed to think you were serious enough that he felt trapped, desperate." Robert studied me for a long moment. "What exactly are you suggesting, Vivian?" "I'm suggesting that Thomas's death was very convenient for you, that the investigation into the firm's finances stopped almost immediately after he died, that you got away with $43 million in fraud because there was no one left to prosecute." "Are you accusing me of something?" "I'm stating facts. What you did with those facts is up to you. He stood up. I think this meeting is over. You're clearly not well. The grief has affected your judgment. I'm going to pretend this conversation never happened, out of respect for Thomas's memory. Sit down, Robert. My voice was hard, commanding, the voice I'd used in boardrooms for 30 years. I'm not done. He hesitated, then sat. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to confess. To the fraud, to framing Thomas, all of it. You're going to go to the FBI and you're going to turn yourself in. He actually laughed. Why on earth would I do that? Because if you don't, I will. I have all of Thomas's evidence. I have enough to trigger a full investigation. And when that investigation happens, everything comes out. Your fraud, your threats, your corruption. You'll lose everything, your reputation, your freedom, your family's legacy. If you had real evidence, you'd have gone to the authorities already. I'm giving you the chance to turn yourself in, to control the narrative, to show some semblance of honor. But if you refuse, then yes, I go to the FBI. Today. He stared at me, calculating. You're bluffing. I'm not, and you know I'm not. Because you know Thomas. You know how thorough he was. If he thought he was going down, he'd make damn sure he had documentation to take you with him. Thomas is dead. Is he? I let the question hang in the air. Robert's face changed. What are you saying? I'm saying I've been going through Thomas's affairs very carefully. And some things don't add up. Some things seem almost too convenient. You're suggesting Thomas faked his death? Robert's voice was incredulous. That's insane. Is it? A man facing prison, facing the destruction of everything he'd built, suddenly dies of a convenient aneurysm right before an investigation would have started? You don't find that suspicious? Dr. Hastings signed the death certificate. Dr. Hastings has gambling debts. Had gambling debts. They were mysteriously paid off around the same time Thomas died. $180,000 worth. I watched Robert's face as he processed that. Watched him realize what I was implying. If Thomas is alive, he said slowly, then he's committed massive fraud. He'd be a fugitive. Yes, he would. And you're protecting him. No, I'm giving you a choice. Confess to your own crimes. Turn yourself in. And maybe I don't pursue the question of whether Thomas actually died. Maybe I let that particular suspicion remain just that, a suspicion. You're trying to blackmail me. I'm trying to get justice. You're a criminal, Robert. You stole $43 million. You framed an innocent man. And you've been living free and comfortable while that man's family suffered. That ends now. Either you confess or I expose everything, including my suspicions about Thomas, which means investigators start looking very closely at Dr. Hastings, at the funeral home, at every detail of that death. And we both know what they'll find. Robert was quiet for a long time. Then he said, If I confess, Thomas stays dead. Thomas stays dead, I confirmed, and you destroy all the evidence connecting me to any attempt to frame him. No. That evidence goes to the FBI as part of your confession. You admit you tried to frame him. That's part of your accountability. That makes my sentence worse. Yes, it does. But it's the truth, and you're going to tell it. He looked at me with something like grudging respect. You've thought this through. I've had 11 months to think. 11 months of grief that you helped cause. So yes, Robert, I've thought this through very carefully. And if I refuse? Then I make one phone call, and your entire life explodes, along with Thomas's new one, and Dr. Hastings's, and everyone else involved. Complete destruction for everyone. Is that what you want? He stood up again, walked to his window, looked out at the city below. His empire. Everything he'd built on lies and stolen money. I need time, he said. You have until 5 o'clock today. After that, I make the call. That's 4 hours. Then you'd better think fast. I stood up, straightened my jacket. One more thing, Robert. Thomas loved you. He looked up to you. You were family to him. And you used that trust to destroy him. I want you to remember that. When you're sitting in a prison cell, when you've lost everything, remember that you didn't just commit fraud. You betrayed someone who loved you. I walked out of his office without looking back. At 4:45, my phone rang. Robert's lawyer. Robert had agreed to turn himself in to the FBI the following morning. He'd be accompanied by his attorney and would provide a full confession. At 5:30, I received a notification that $4.2 million had been transferred into the account I'd specified. Thomas had paid. Robert had confessed. Dr. Hastings's written statement was locked in a safe deposit box. All the pieces were in place, and now I had to decide what to do with them. I sat in my lawyer's office 3 days later with Garrett and Simone on either side of me. Marcus Webb, the private investigator, sat across from us with a thick folder of documents. Everything we'd collected, everything we'd learned, the entire truth about Thomas Ashford's fake death and Robert Ashford's fraud. "The FBI arrested Robert this morning," Marcus said. "He's being charged with wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. He's looking at 15 to 20 years minimum." "And his confession?" I asked. "Includes everything, the fraud scheme, his attempt to frame Thomas, all of it. He's cooperating fully, probably hoping for a reduced sentence." Garrett leaned forward. "Which means they'll want to question anyone who might have information about the fraud, including Thomas." "Except Thomas is dead," Marcus said, "according to all official records, so unless someone tells them otherwise, he's not part of this investigation." We all knew what he was really asking. Was I going to tell them? Was I going to expose the truth about Thomas? I'd spent the last 3 days wrestling with that question. I'd barely slept, barely eaten, just turned it over and over in my mind, looking at it from every angle. "I visited Rachel," I said quietly. Simone's head snapped toward me. "You what?" "2 days ago. I went to her house, introduced myself, told her my name was Vivienne and that I was a friend of Michael's from his old life." "Mom," Garrett said carefully, "what did you say to her?" I asked her about their relationship, how they met, what he'd told her about his past. She showed me pictures, her late husband, her children. She talked about how hard it had been after he died, how lonely, how meeting Michael had felt like a miracle, a second chance at happiness. I pulled out my phone, showed them a photo I'd taken. Rachel with her 2 children, James and Emma, at what looked like a park. All 3 of them smiling, happy. "Those kids have already lost one father," I said, "and Rachel has already been through the grief I experienced, the real grief, not the manufactured kind." "Thomas deserves to face consequences," Garrett said, but his voice was softer now. "He does, and he will, just not the way we thought." I opened my briefcase and pulled out a legal document. I had papers drawn up. Thomas is going to sign over everything, the house in Greenwich, all remaining assets in his name. A trust fund I'm establishing for Garrett and Simone. Everything he has, he's giving to us. "In exchange for what?" Simone asked. "In exchange for Michael Brennan getting to keep existing, as long as he follows very specific rules." I laid out the terms I'd negotiated with Thomas over the past 2 days. He would never contact me again, never contact Garrett or Simone, never return to Connecticut or any state where we might accidentally encounter him. He would stay Michael Brennan for the rest of his life, living quietly in whatever small corner of the country he chose. The $4.2 million would be placed in a restitution fund I was establishing. Working with the FBI, we'd ensure it went back to Robert's victims. Thomas's theft would be attributed to Robert as part of his larger scheme. No one would ever know Thomas had taken anything. "And if he breaks these rules?" Marcus asked. "Then I go to the FBI with everything." "Doctor, Hastings' confession, the evidence of the faked death, all of it. Thomas spends the rest of his life in prison. He agreed to this? Garrett asked. He did. Yesterday. He signed everything. It's done. Simone was crying quietly. I don't know if this is justice or mercy. It's both, I said. And it's neither. It's just the choice I could live with. I'd met with Thomas one final time, at a rest stop off I-95, halfway between Westchester and Greenwich. Neutral territory. He'd looked worse than I'd ever seen him. Hollow-eyed, defeated. Rachel knows something's wrong, he'd told me. She knows I'm scared, but she doesn't know why. You could tell her the truth, I'd said. Give her the choice about whether to stay with someone who faked his death and abandoned his family. If I tell her, I lose her. I lose everything. You already lost everything, Thomas. You lost it when you chose to die instead of fight. This way, you get to keep the illusion. But it's all it is. An illusion built on lies. He'd signed the papers with shaking hands, transferred the last of his assets, agreed to every term I'd set. I'm sorry, he'd said as I was leaving. I know that doesn't mean anything now, but I am. I'm sorry for all of it. I'd looked at him one last time, this man I'd loved for 34 years, this stranger wearing his face. I don't forgive you, I'd said. I don't think I ever will, but I'm letting you go, not for you. For Rachel and those children, because they don't deserve to suffer for your choices. But Thomas, Michael, whoever you are now, if you ever hurt them the way you hurt me, if you ever lie to them, if you ever make them feel even a fraction of what you put me through, I will destroy you. Do you understand? He'd nodded, unable to speak. Good. Then this is goodbye. Forever. Now, sitting in my lawyer's office, I felt the weight of that decision, the complexity of it. I hadn't chosen pure justice, but I hadn't chosen pure mercy either. I'd chosen something in between, something messy and human and imperfect. Dr. Hastings is losing his medical license, Marcus said, pulling me back to the present. The medical board found irregularities in his patient records. Nothing connected to Thomas specifically, but enough to trigger an investigation. He's accepting the revocation rather than fight it. And Marcus at the funeral home? Closed his business, moved out of state. He knows how close he came to criminal charges. So there were consequences. Not the ones I'd originally imagined, not prison and public exposure, but consequences nonetheless. Lives changed, careers ended, the ripple effects of Thomas's choices spreading outward. What about you, Mom? Simone asked softly. What happens to you now? I thought about that question, about the woman I'd been 11 months ago. Confident, successful, secure in her marriage and her life. That woman was gone. She died in the kitchen that Sunday morning, just as surely as if the aneurysm had been real. But in her place was someone else. Someone harder, maybe, but also stronger. Someone who'd faced the worst betrayal imaginable and decided how to respond to it on her own terms. I'm selling the house, I said. Too many memories. I'm moving to Manhattan, near Simone, starting fresh. And the charity project? Simone asked. I'm expanding it, using Thomas's money, the restitution fund, all of it. Creating a foundation for widows and widowers, real ones, people dealing with genuine grief, providing therapy, support groups, financial counseling, everything I wished I'd had. That's beautiful, Mom, Garrett said. It's necessary, I corrected. Thomas took my grief and made it into a lie. This is how I make something true out of it. We left the lawyer's office and walked out into a bright December afternoon. The city was decorated for Christmas, lights and wreaths and that particular energy New York gets during the holidays. Do you think you'll ever tell anyone the truth? Simone asked as we stood on the sidewalk. The whole truth about what happened? Maybe someday, I said. Or maybe not. Maybe some truths are meant to stay private. What matters is that we know. We know who Thomas really was. We know what he did. And we made our choices about how to respond. Garrett hugged me tight. I'm proud of you, Mom. What you did. How you handled all of this. It couldn't have been easy. Nothing about this was easy, I said. But it's done now. It's finished. Simone linked her arm through mine. Lunch? There's a new place in Soho I've been wanting to try. Lunch sounds perfect. We walked down Fifth Avenue together, my children on either side of me, and for the first time in 11 months, I felt something other than grief, or rage, or confusion. I felt free. Thomas was gone. Truly gone this time. Not dead, but gone from my life in every way that mattered. And yes, part of me would always wonder if I'd made the right choice, if I should have pursued pure justice regardless of the cost, if letting him live out his lies with Rachel made me complicit somehow. But I'd done what felt right to me, what I could live with, and in the end, that was all any of us could do, make our choices and live with the consequences. I'd chosen mercy for the innocent, consequences for the guilty, and freedom for myself, a new life, a new identity in some ways. No longer Thomas Ashford's widow, no longer defined by his death or his betrayal, just Vivian, 56 years old, survivor, fighter, woman who'd faced the impossible and found her way through it. That night, alone in my hotel room, I took off my wedding ring for the first time in 34 years. The band left a pale mark on my finger. 34 years of indentation. Of wearing this symbol of promises that had turned out to be conditional. I placed the ring in a small box along with the last photo I had of Thomas and me together, taken at Garrett's wedding 2 years ago. Both of us smiling, happy, unaware of what was coming. I closed the box and put it in the back of the closet. Some memories deserved to be kept, but they didn't need to be on display. Tomorrow I'd start looking at apartments, start planning the foundation, start building the next chapter of my life. But tonight, I just sat by the window and watched the city lights and felt the weight of the past 11 months finally, slowly, beginning to lift. Thomas had tried to destroy me with his lie, tried to erase himself and move on while leaving me trapped in grief. But I'd survived, more than survived. I'd taken control, made my own choices, decided my own ending. And that was worth more than any revenge could ever be. I was free, finally completely free. And whatever came next, I'd face it on my own terms.